What does it actually mean to live in your divinity and humanity at the same time? Today, I have with me Jennifer Spor, and she's going to talk about her work in this field. And this is a part of the Magdalene Interview Series. So, if this is your first time seeing us on here, welcome. We're happy to have you. I've created the Magdalene Interview Series to begin to widen the conversation around who Mary Magdalene is, what she represents, and broadening the conversation to be more inclusive. This is also done in conjunction with the Magdalene Pleasure Pilgrimage, which I am leading to the south of France in September. And if some of the things that we talk about today stir something in you, I'd love for you to reach out and we can talk about what it would look like for you to join us in the south of France and kind of basking in this both Magdalene energy, but very empowered, embodied female energy that so many of us need today and are craving. So without further ado, welcome, Jennifer. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm excited to be here for this conversation, and I just love Mary Magdalene, and so I'm just feel like it's such a treat, and an honor to have this conversation. So, my name is Jennifer Spor, and I am an oversoul embodied mentor. And so, what does that mean, right? I support mission-led women to not only be clear in the truth of who they are and what they're here to contribute on this planet, but to live that embodiment through their day-to-day reality. Talking about what the oversoul is could be an hours long conversation on its own, but to put it in the simplest context in this conversation, so we can talk more about Mary as well, right? To say that everybody at this point, and definitely if you're watching this interview right now, you are familiar with the term soul-led, okay? And you're living a soul-led life, right? So you're tuning into your highest self. You are channeling your highest self. You may even have a team of trusted guides that you consult with on occasion, right? But what happens on our quest to lead a soul-led life is that we're tuning in, and we're even taking actions based upon that, right? But then there are times when we are living outside of that. So that could be showing up in relationships intentionally as a lesser version of the truth of who you are to meet someone else. It could be hesitation in taking action on a decision that you've already made for yourself internally. Those are just two examples, but it can show up in a lot of different ways. Our oversoul is the overarching I am, is the overarching essence of who we are that transcends lifetimes, okay? So, for example, your soul purpose in this lifetime represents actually a fragment of that oversoul being, because you've had lots of incarnations and lots of different lives, lots of different missions in those lives, right? So that's really the difference. So the work that I do is I work with mission-led women to create space in their physical bodies to receive the essence of their oversoul so that they are living as that 24/7. So there is no tuning in, because they are naturally waking up that way every day, going to bed every night that way, and making all of their decisions and actions from that space. And so my work is, a combination of oversoul channeling, akashic, energetic, somatic, structural, right? Because I'm working with these women to bring their mission work, including overall the truth of who they are, into actual lived form. So that's what I do. And that's another reason why I'm thrilled to be having this conversation today, because Mary Magdalene, I have had a close connection with her for quite some time, and she represents to me Um, one of the greatest examples of someone who has lived on this earth plane embodied as their oversoul, right? Which is a segue into talking about living embodied in your divinity, which for me has always been defined as living equally embodied as your divine self and your human self, because it's a dance here. And that's what Mary Magdalene's experience of living here has it is what it represents to me. So I love having this talk about this, right? Because
Yeah.
I think I was saying to you, Melissa, before we started this conversation, a lot of the world tends to live in polarization, right? Kind of either on one spectrum or the other. Either you're very much in a space of being on your spiritual journey and you may not be totally grounded, right? And or you may be in another space where you are definitely tuned into your physical reality, but you're not necessarily seeing beyond what's possible for you beyond the constructs of that third dimensional reality, right? So really this life here, it's a dance. It's a dance of your humanity, your divinity, and living expressed in the truth of who you are.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. The element of human in the divine, and divine in the human is so becomes so rich for me and so important in my own like lived experience with having been someone who used spirituality, like thought that that was the goal, was to just like become as little human as possible. And it was really miserable, and it was not a
Yeah.
and I was also miserable to be around. I think allowing myself to accept my humanity allows me to accept that in others in a massive way. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious what that looks like for you in your work. If someone is comes to you, or even for yourself, triggered or emotional or challenged, or has an addiction, or just like human shit that happens, like what does
Yeah.
this mean to live in this union?
Right. I mean, if someone's coming to into my awareness or into my sphere where they're feeling challenged in some way, um, it really starts with deeper exploration around the root cause of the experience that they're having, right? Because in order to get to the season on your journey here where you're able to truly and willingly, and when I say willingly, I'm including your physical body's willingness as well,
Yeah.
uh, there needs to be space within your being for that, right? Within your body for that. So someone who is, you know, trying to navigate addiction or trauma, right? Or oppression, even, or discrimination, um, deeper exploration around how they're feeling and what they're experiencing is fundamental to creating the space for what I'm talking about, right? For them to feel individually for themselves more of that balance of the divine and the human aspect. That is part of the journey to union. And when I'm talking about union, I'm speaking about the inner union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what does it look like to walk around fully embodied in your what do you call it? Oversoul. Like what does that look like day to day? Because I think that so often, religions and there's this sort of, okay, when you've reached a certain level, this is what it should look like. The yogic path teaches a certain way. The Christian path teaches a certain way. And I'm so curious how you see that. Like, what does it look like if you're living fully embodied?
Yeah, at the point that you're living fully embodied, there is there's no urgency, there's no hate, there's no sense of having to show up expressed less than who you really are, because you are who you are through your day to day, every moment of your living, right? Um, you are not bypassing anything by any means, but you're also not getting tangled up in the reactivity of everything that's going on either. And when you wake up in the morning, you can palpably feel the presence of yourself in your body. So, really, living in an embodied state, you've transcended addiction, you've transcended anything that was triggering you from your prior experiences, whether they're in this life or another one. I mean, you've definitely spent time, and whether you've invested time, money, resources, whatever else, to do that inner work. And everybody has a different role in the world, right? If we were all here meant to focus on the same missions or be passionate about the same things, right? Or do the same things, what would that mean for our world? Right? It really is, what our traditional society has tried to do, which is create an infrastructure of conformity, which, as many people not only know and feel, is directly against the grain of who we are as these amazing multidimensional beings, right? Our society promotes conformity. It promotes fear. It promotes hate. And that is not who any of us are. We are love in human form. And
Some of what you're saying brings up a question for me around sacred rage. So when I think about Mary Magdalene, I think that this is a woman who definitely knew her sacred rage. We don't necessarily have examples of her turning over tables. We have an example from Jesus doing that, but like, she stood for what she knew in the face of like tremendous danger, really, to
absolutely.
multiple scenarios. And so I'm curious, like, how you feel like anger and rage and this kind of, justified, like, this isn't right energy shows up when you're living in this embodied divine human state.
Yeah, it's still there. Absolutely. But yeah, no, I'm not throwing over any tables. If anything, what enrages me, what angers me, serves as a channel to fuel me,
Mm-hmm.
to help more people, to fuel me to show up in a greater way.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way that we change the world, is channeling that rage, that sacred rage, through showing up, through leading forward, through our willingness to see all of it for what it is and move through it. It's
Yeah.
a great question that you asked, because there's so much going on in the world and none of it is right. Okay. It's like, this interview probably has clean language, so I'm not going to get into
No,
any of
it
that.
doesn't.
None of it.
No.
Okay. None of it is fucking right. Okay. None of it is. But our world, our society is set up to, by design, counting on the fact that people like us will get emotionally entangled in it to the point that we're exhausted and distracted and we're unable to show up in our power. Okay? So it is important now more than it has ever been in the history of this planet for every single one of us who know we're here for something greater, who know that we are here, we have something to say, someone to be, and how we're here to contribute, to not let anything get in our freaking way.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the question around like allowing yourself to be informed and know what is happening in our world, and
Yes.
how to be an actual lived help in that, versus
Yes.
letting it become all consuming and sending you down rabbit holes of fear. And I have been on every side of that conversation, and it's hard. Like some things, it feels so impossible. It feels like, well, what could I
Yes.
possibly do to make a difference? But I also think like we really should be asking ourselves, like, really, what can I do to make a difference? And I see that happening in work, in one-on-one settings, but I also see like the value and importance of listening to people's lived experiences that are different than ours, and being in proximity with people, you know, from multiple cultures and multiple
Yeah.
backgrounds and things like that. And yeah, my goodness. I mean, just on CNN this morning, this has come up several times today about
Yeah.
what's going on there. And so, like, how are we being a support to empower women to, you know, they're the target, vulnerable victim in that instance. So anyway, I do think that's like a really important conversation around how we hold our mission and how we allow our hearts to crack
Yes.
open.
Because that's the answer to the question that you posed, right? It's like, well, how can I make a difference? What can I do? That starts with getting really clear and grounded in the truth of who you are, not just, you know, your values. This is beyond values, okay? This is like, out of the 10 million things, the 10 million effed up things that are going on in the world right now that I definitely care about and that I'm definitely angry about, right? What am I ready to fall on the sword for? What am I also really talented at contributing at where I can make the greatest difference? Those are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, and then making a conscious choice to direct our energies in that way, right? But a lot of us hesitate in that. In fact, a lot of people, a lot of women, okay, everybody, not everybody, but the people who are conscious to that, right? They already know what they're feeling called to, but a lot of people hesitate in taking action on it because of fear of what they'll lose, right? Whether it's losing a relationship, losing a job, you know, losing their current way of living, whatever that is, right? It really requires a crossing of a threshold
It
to
does.
understand that you need to move from an externally based threshold, from trying to hold on to your physical reality, to really beginning to embody the truth that you create your reality through your choices. And at the end of the day, let's take relationships for an example, because that's a big one, right? You're scared of losing a relationship with someone close to you. I would encourage you to ask yourself some questions about that, right? Like, why are you scared about losing that relationship? And how fully does the dynamic of that relationship align with the truth of who you are? Is there reciprocity? And chances are, you know, once you create the space to ask yourself, you're going to find out some things that maybe you just didn't create the time and space to contemplate or to allow to come forward to the service before. But it's exercises just like that is how we change the world, right? Is through our willingness to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that that's how Mary Magdalene lived. And she had her human moments too, right? Because she's human. She, you know, Jesus as well. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about that all day, and it doesn't mean it's easy, right?
I think this question around we create our lived reality, and that is such a tricky one. It's something that I deeply believe in my own experiences because I've gone within to each experience and been very much in this like, why did I choose this experience? Like, if there was some part of my spirit before I came here or whatever, however it works, that chose this experience, like, what is the wisdom in that for me? And I have found a tremendous support in asking myself that question. But in this current like state that I'm in, where I have been massively unburying my head from the sand around racism and around the real injustices that have happened in our country, as well as continue to happen. I've just done a whole deep dive around women in Iran. I have a post coming out, I think, tomorrow about that. Where do we hold that element when someone's entire life, for example, a slave, was not their own choice, where their body wasn't their own, their time wasn't their own, and around this idea of like we create our lived reality or we create our experience. I just think, like, is it possible that we're speaking from a place of privilege when we say that? Because for me, going inward, even to my deepest trials, that has deeply served me. But like, I also would never turn around and say that to one of these women in Iran. You know what I mean? Like, how do we hold that?
Well, that needs to be clarified. Okay. That needs to be clarified. When I say creating your reality, I'm speaking in the context of creating based upon your own free will choices. Absolutely. Uh, what's happening with women in Iran, with racism, with all of the oppression that's going on, nobody asked for that, and they didn't cause it.
Yeah.
There are things that happen in the world that we, to us, to others, right, that they do not choose. So the context that I'm speaking in is in regard to your free will choice, right? And I understand that some of these people, there are many people within across different circumstances and backgrounds who have had their own freedom and free will taken away from them.
Yeah. And I think it really matters. And I think what I have been coming into as I have been like seeking to learn to create more inclusive spaces and really seeking to understand. I mean, I have felt absolutely called into this by Mary Magdalene herself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this, awareness that like that's there, and like that a sweeping statement like that like could be really harmful to some, depending on what their lived experiences are right now. And and I say that, and I know that, like, I mean, my goodness, I won't go into the depths of the things that I have gone into meditation around this with, but like they have been deeply unfair and deeply out of my control. And
Yeah.
yet, like, they have also been this part of my life, not the whole thing in this whole, iteration of my human experience.
Right.
So anyway, so I just felt like that was kind of an important rabbit hole to go down. I think
Absolutely.
as we begin to wind up here, and thank you for all that you shared. I'd love to just ask, like, what ways does this Magdalene energy or working with Mary Magdalene show up for you today?
Yeah, it really shows up in how I choose to live my own life. I, through life experience, right, and choice to see, um, I choose to come from a space of clear sight, from truth, and from love, from unconditional love, you know?
Yeah.
That's the space that I choose to show up every day from. And I feel it's in my own lived experience. And I also speak about often is that it's really important for us to have the willingness to cultivate curiosity and also humility, right? Because we um are in our human aspect, right? We are a product essentially of our own backgrounds and experiences. And that does shape, it can shape our perceptions. And so it's so important, so fundamental, so foundational
Mm-hmm.
to be open to learning, to be open to seeing, to be open to trying to understand, to be open to be of support while standing in the truth of who we are. Because we can do that. We can honor the truth of who we are and embody humility.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. That has been my deepest learning in these last several months. And well, thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your work with us and things today and your relationship with the Magdalene. And I've appreciated this conversation with you. And thank you again to those of you who have watched with us on the Magdalene Interview Series. I will be going live again in like 2 hours. Today was a big recording day of Magdalene interviews, and I'm just like in this space of swimming in this energy and being called deeper and deeper into love and deeper into underworld spaces that I did not expect to be called. Welcome to Magdalene Energy. So we'd love to see you again on our next episode of the Magdalene Interview Series. And please do give Jennifer a follow. You can find her links and everything in the description above. Bye for now.